Good evening. We call to order this meeting of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, October 15th, 2024. I have an approval of tonight's agenda, please.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion's made by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Costa to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor, Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Costa, Mr. Brace? Aye. Mr. Francis? Can you hear us, Dave?
Barely. The volume seems to be pretty low. Aye.
Bossy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Has everybody had a chance to review the draft minutes for October 1st, 2024? Any revisions?
To Dave and Dave, I just sent them like maybe 30 minutes ago, so they should be in your email queue.
Yeah, just taking a look now.
Look at the one that says revised, so they didn't mess the date up on.
We just changed Jim Sherlin's name twice to my
Yeah.
name once and Jim's name.
Okay.
Dave and Dave, if you'd like, we can push this
I-
ahead so later in the meeting.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at them. I'll look at them now.
All right. We'll continue the approval of minutes to later in the meeting. Under Chairman's report, we have select board public hearing on proposed amendment to shellfish regulations to allow the lowering or raising of the commercial bay scull bushel limit. And that will be held during a public hearing tomorrow evening. I believe that's 5:30. The select board, anybody interested in speaking about this or just listening in? I suggest joining the meeting. We have a Marine Department report.
She's not here.
Natural resources, please, Tara.
All right, we're just finishing up field season. Today we had UMass come down and train us on microplastic identification. So all the filters that we sampled and stored, we are now in the process of going through and counting and separating out whether it's a strand, fragment, a film, or a bead, or fiber. Those are all the categories. And then, so as soon as we're done counting those, they go up to UMass and they'll put them through the special machine to identify the plastics. We sent the first 2 weeks of samples from 7/29 and 8/6 up today. Those are the ones that we counted, so that we should hopefully have some information about the first 2 weeks at the next SHAB meeting. Jeff and JC and I have been going through the regulations, talking about the next phase of what we need to push through. JC's indicated that some of the violations and stuff that he needs them to be in place as soon as possible. So I think at the next meeting, we should, kind of look at some of like the next chunk that needs to go through and get approved. Like Andy said, the public hearing is tomorrow night at the select board, the only public hearing. And yeah, we're just getting ready for scallop season and open to any questions you might have related to that.
Yeah. During the nor'easter, were there any strandings?
Not that were reported or that we found. We sent 2 staff members around to check all the beaches. We did go out. Our largest survey spot was off of Quays, kind of deep off of Quays. And then when we went back out there after the wind event, it was empty. And I talked to Jim Sherlin and I talked to like some other people about ideas of, where it could have gone. We were expecting to find like a big band of scallops or a large amount. But I think what happened is everything blew down towards the UMass Field Station and off of Fulling Mill. But I think they blew in a way that they were more scattered than in a group. And so it wasn't easy to just look down and say, there's that huge amount.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of people getting getting the limits quickly over on Bass Point. And so I thought, it made me think maybe there was might have been stranding somewhere around, maybe from Parkmore Point halfway down.
Now, I know Bass Point was our biggest seed collection spot the prior year, and we've been dredging on that, and there's a lot of shell in there. The meats are pretty small, but they're still pretty dense there,
East side or west side?
the east side.
East side.
I noticed while bush raking, about in the middle of Second Bend, a heavy amount of what the fishermen would call wool. And just curious if this is being identified in other areas.
In Second Bend, you
Yeah,
said? I don't remember seeing any in our surveys, and we only have one spot in Second Bend. The only place that we really saw it in Nantucket Harbor, we saw a little bit in the shallows of the UMass Field Station and then over near the Great Harbor Yacht Club. And then in Mattocket, it was everywhere.
Mm.
So, it was less than we've seen in previous years. But we did see like a lot of, what do we call it? The slime that's on there. It wasn't Limbia, it's Ectocarpus siliculosis, but it's just like the slimy stuff that gums up the dredges, and usually there's a lot of wind to blow it off before our surveys, but there wasn't this year, so we saw a lot of it, and it was just kind of covering everything. But the Limbia that you're talking about is like the black woolly stuff, and we didn't see a ton of it in Nantucket Harbor, so
That's good.
I'll have to check it out in Second Bend.
Was the survey completed before the northeast blow?
It was, yeah.
what's the harbor temperature at now?
I'm not sure,
62.
yeah.
62,
Really still, wow.
it was 65. Right?
I don't know.
I think it came down a few degrees with this easter.
Balmy from Maine.
Yeah, it's warm. That's why that wool's still there too. It's part of it. We haven't had a cold snap to really kill it.
Okay. But that will happen with a cold snap.
Hopefully, I mean, last year we dealt with that wool over, it was over by east side of UMass. It was in there till January, just about. If you went over on the beach in there were scallops in it, but there was wool on top of it. I don't know.
Right.
We'll
Any
see.
other questions or comments?
Yeah,
on-
Mr. Chairman,
That's all.
what's the plan for the opening the ponds?
I'm not sure of the exact dates yet. Last I heard, last week Emma was working on trying to secure those dates, but
Okay.
just having a hard time with the contractor.
Because we're usually opening before this one, right?
Any more questions or comments from the board on natural resources report? Anything from the public? Move right into old business, continued review and update of shellfish regulations. Carol, we just simply weren't sure if there was more to discuss here, so we kept it on the agenda. If not, well,
Well, I'm sorry.
yeah, either place.
You say it better about doing the minutes well in advance of them talking to you, because, Bobby made a point and at the last meeting of saying, for the next agenda in 2 weeks, we want to have a discussion about raising or lowering. I mean, I know that's coming up for the public hearing tomorrow, but you were quite adamant about having that on the agenda, but if we can cover it with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, from my point of
I'm
view,
happy to discuss this,
yeah, I mean, we
absolutely.
can discuss it, but until it's enacted by the selectmen, there really isn't.
Okay,
I just thinking, I wanted to have the ability after the next meeting, I guess, once we've gone scallop in a couple of days and we see what is, I can't get a real feel for what the weight is gonna be out of the scallops yet. But if 5 boxes is cutting around 30 pounds like it was last year instead of 35 or 40, then I would consider, at least personally, going maybe to a 6 box to try to get the weight. As I said in the past, and you're all aware of, it seems like our market now is more November, December than it used to be January, February, March. The price used to always go up after the first year, and now it seems to go down. And if we can You know, we always used to be able to figure on 35 pounds a day. That's what was the average. We would catch 7 pounds a box, and with the warmer weather or whatever, the abundance of scallops, we're not getting that weight. So I would like, if we have to go to 6 boxes to get close to that weight. That's my thought, and that's just me personally. I don't know what the rest of the board feels, but until the selectmen act and give us the ability to do this quickly. We talked about it last year, remember, in late November, I think it was, but by the time we figured we could have public hearings and everything else, it would have been useless at that point. We're almost into January, so. That's where I'm at.
I just since I just did the minutes, like, it sounded like you wanted to like talk about it at this meeting.
Well, I didn't realize that the selectmen hadn't acted yet.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was really, yeah, I thought that if it was in place,
Yeah,
then we could have a more in-depth discussion as what we think the weights are gonna be and stuff. So now basically, for me, I'm just moving it to our first meeting in November.
so no, yeah,
Yeah, and then actually we'll have a couple days of fishing in, so we'll be able to get a better idea.
Yeah, well, some data at that point,
Yeah.
what to,
Yeah, cause it's hard to tell from the bush raking what the weights are gonna be, cause you haven't gone into the deep water yet. So, you know, a lot of times those scallops are much bigger than the deep water. I know my son went diving in Mattocket last week in Warren's Landing, and he got a half a bushel pretty quick, and they were really good sized meats. I was surprised to see. But I don't know if you can dredge in there because, again, the wool might be so thick, you might not be able to dredge in there until later in the season. And I don't know how thick they are in there
I
either.
pushed right there on opening day, and there may have been scallops there, but they were underneath the crap, and
Yeah, well,
I was up to here headed toward
he said he
toward the
was,
salt marsh, and I was just like,
he was snorkeling and he was in like 6 feet of water. And it seems to me like, from what I've heard from people that have been out, I haven't been personally yet, that the snorkelers are doing much better than the push rakers. And the scallops this year aren't on top of the beach because we didn't have a lot of wind this summer. So they're in the deeper water, and they seem to, you know, guys are telling me that they're diving down and picking 4 or 5 up at a time in a little bitty area. So that's a good sign, but it's not great for the guy that's trying to do it in waders and a push rake, unfortunately. But
waiters.
yeah.
Waiters.
A lot of people do.
Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, when I first get on board here and discussing weights, catch them out. When the conversation turned to price, I recall a comment, I believe it was Wendy McCrae, saying that price of scallops is not something we really discuss or is within our purview. The weight.
The weight, yes, but you know, we don't. It's not
The
really,
weight is basically relating
yeah,
to what a fisherman can make per day. I'd like to be able to entertain this discussion, because it really means a lot to the sustainability of the fishery itself. If the fishermen are making a day's wage, then they're gonna be discouraged from fishing at all. And even though price may not enter our discussion, things that come close or maybe border that fine line of price discussion within a weight discussion, I just wanna make sure we're above board with what we're speaking about, and I'd like to think we are when we're sticking to.
we can't help but talk about money, but we can't talk about we can't make a decision that's based on how scalpers are gonna think.
I'm only asking you because this was roughly 9 years ago.
Yeah.
You were there, and I just wanted.
Wendy was adamant about, you know, us not getting involved in the money of it, but still, we have to talk about it because the price comes up and what the weight is, and, you know.
Well. The money is part of it, as you said, Andy, but I'm thinking more about. What the abundance is and what the weight is, so that we. Get our scallops harvested through the course of the year. I mean. I opened some scallops the other day, and there were a lot of 30-year scallops there. That didn't get caught last year. I mean, we all know what the fleet goes to after January 15th. And if we go to an extra box in November, December, to ensure that we're gonna harvest all of our catch. Again, it's based on the surveys, how much scallops we see out there. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say we need to go to 6 boxes if it's not a good year. So, yeah, money does factor into it. It always factors into everything, but it's the same. It's a
Well,
broader
of
picture.
Andy, right now, I'm sorry, for right now, we don't know what the price is, so it's okay if we talk about it, because we know what last year's price was. And that's in the past, so we're just speculating now, right?
Well, and abundance, as you just mentioned, but didn't in the opening of this discussion. And I feel the same way as we all should here at Shab, that abundance, is gonna play the major role in increasing the limit.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Tara, but if you have an abundance of scallops and you don't harvest all the adults, is it detrimental to the seed the next year that those adults are still in the queue feeding on the same? Isn't it usually, my experience, and I could be completely wrong, was when, on years when you don't have a big crop of seed, you seem to have bigger eyes. When you have a large amount of seed in a dense area, they don't seem to grow as big because they're competing for the food. So that's one of the reasons why we always used to move seed around, so that we didn't have too much in one spot.
I think in general, more scallops, the less opportunity, the more competition there is for food, especially if they're packed really dense like Bashal. But we don't have a lot of information. This last year was the first year that we had 3rd-year scallops in our surveys.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of information on that.
I'm sure they spat, so I don't think it's a bad thing to have them, but.
So in a 30-year scallop, are you seeing 2 growth rings?
We do, but they're not gonna, I don't think that they're spawning in the 3rd year.
I notice it when we open them, you can see the movement just, if it doesn't come off the bottom shell when you pull the gut, a lot of times it just. For me, I can tell when I throw it in the barrel, but I imagine the novice would not know, and I don't know if they can get sick from eating a 3rd-year scallop or not, but
They look tired in the shell.
they just,
They shrunk back from the edge a little bit too.
they look like I look.
So I had noticed in some of my catch that some growth rings were right down at the edge, the opening edge of the skull.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess another question would be, how are the scallops looking for identifying mature scallops this year? Any signs of nubs? Yeah,
Yeah, I think a lot of like the stuff that was packed really dense, like Bashal is, they're small classics. And we're seeing some of that like around Abrams, but for the most part, stuff got spread out pretty well, but they definitely have a very distinct growth line from the disturbance that they had with moving. And then as far as the nubs that we found in our surveys, a lot of them were really small. Like I would be interested to go out and measure some more now, like a month later, to see if they made it. Because that was one thing that we were concerned about. Like, no, not that small, like borderline.
Yeah.
Borderline.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know, the scallops that I've opened so far, a few times that I've opened, they have well-defined growth rings on them. You could tell just, the growth on the shells, the growth ring was a quarter size or a dime size. I didn't see any nubs. I didn't see that clean, big seed. I haven't seen that yet, but we haven't thrown dredges really anywhere in the harbor where that stuff usually is. Huzzy shoal,
well,
wide off the third.
as you say, we'll get a better feel for that in November. I just, it always concerns me if there are a lot of nubs out there, and it becomes an issue, not only for the fishermen, but with.
And for JC having to.
Yeah, exactly.
I have one more comment, if that's all right.
Please, Sharon.
I just want to say, like, from our surveys, like what we're gonna be basing, if people decide they want a bushel increase. We'll be basing it on our surveys, but it's 40 sites in the harbor and 8 sites in Mattakit. And so just for an example, like our largest site that I just talked about in Quays that kind of vanished, we were wondering, we're like, did we just dive on a pile of scallops? Like, and is that going to skew all our results? So I think it would be really good if we could at least get a week at a minimum in there of guys going in and saying, I don't know what you saw in your surveys, but there's not much there, because I don't want to be wrong on this. I mean, I feel pretty confident that we moved a lot of stuff around and we can't dive the whole harbor to know how it's doing, and just the general increase at these 40 sites indicate that things are doing well. But I think it'd be good to have people in there, you know, dredging around and just letting us, you know, verifying it.
I think that one of the important things is having in multiple places too.
Yeah.
You have it in one spot, you get fished up pretty quick, but.
But people aren't gonna fish in multiple places.
No, I'm just saying, for, as far as,
Well-
as far as seeing how long the season.
I think
Yeah.
you'll see once you get a full weekend. I mean, I don't think we can make a decision what the second meeting, the first meeting in November is like, we've scalded 3 days.
Yeah,
But I think by the second meeting in November, we could have a pretty good idea, and that could still give everybody another 5 or 6 weeks, because really it's Thanksgiving through Christmas when the bulk of the scallops is, when the demand's the highest,
yeah,
you know, so, I mean, it's just to keep it on our radar, you know, but 2 weeks in, I think we'll have a pretty good idea, because the fleet's gonna spread out, and you'll be able to tell by what time guys get in and,
mhm.
you know, what the all that stuff, so.
Okay. Any more discussion on shellfish regulations and or the bushel limit? Next, an old business advisory to select board on vineyard wind and offshore wind in general. I'd like to read into the minutes. I was invited to meet with two of the lawyers from Cultural Heritage, which I did yesterday. That's Will Cook and Greg Werkheiser. If y'all don't mind, I think this is imperative to our decision. Greg and I regret that we'll be traveling during today's meeting of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, but appreciate the invitation to join you. We hope the following information is helpful. As we discussed, the town is engaged in ongoing and regular conversations with Vineyard Wind and GE Vernova to address potential harm to Nantucket arising from the blade failure. Both companies have offered to make the town and its citizens whole, so we have been collecting information related to environmental and other harm and how to quantify that harm. Please share with us any information about potential harm to water quality and shellfish beds if this information becomes available. In addition, the town is engaged in ongoing and regular conversations with Vineyard Wind about ways to supplement, clarify, and strengthen the existing community benefit agreement, which I believe they mean the Good Neighbor Agreement, to provide more assurances to the town to address future turbine blade failures, which were not anticipated during the permitting for the project. We cannot provide details right now about these conversations to preserve the town's attorney-client privilege, but we'll keep you updated about our progress. Finally, in addition to working with Vineyard Wind, GE Vernova, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, Brookmore has been working around the clock these past months with Nantucket's legislative delegation to help Nantucket with answers to the town's questions and to ensure better safeguards are in place in the future. In the meantime, please feel free to contact us directly with questions or concerns. Will Cook. You know, our concerns here at SHAB, for the most part, are, you know, what type of negative effects are happening within our harbors. And that's what we really need to keep our focus on. It was nice to hear that discussions are taking place. It's unfortunate that we can't be involved in these discussions or even be informed of what the discussions entail. And I just, this for me would adjust if we're going to work on a recommendation tonight. You know, it would, for me, it would adjust how we recommend as far as, you know, basically stating what our concerns are within the harbors. I would not want to send a recommendation prematurely with discussions currently taking place between the select board and Vineyard Wind and affiliated parties. So, board members, thoughts,
I mean,
reactions, Mr. Anderson?
I can look at this as one of the worst contracts or agreements I've ever read in 41 years. Or I can look at it as a great opportunity because it's so defective. The defectiveness, it doesn't protect anybody for the environmental issues at all. Or the pollution. It lacks not enough definitions to what's really transpired. It limits this agreement to 15 years. And then there's no, after 15 years, it's kind of done. And it also gives you the ability to walk away. If Vineyard Winds doesn't like what's going on, they can walk away. There's a lot of clauses in their benefit. So we go forward, I think we have to add the environmental stuff, the microplastics, the water quality, and just the contamination of the beaches itself. So.
In addition to what you just said, right, about the contract.
Right, it's so defective for the protection of us and I'll say the harbor shellfish. That it's worthless, but at the same time being worthless, it opens the door. For a better contract to protect all those things because. That's why it's defective.
Well,
Wait a minute, just to clarify, Scott, thank you for that. You obviously read the entire agreement. You came up with, you basically have taken the words out of my mouth, but you have it memorized and I don't. It sounded like, and just to clarify, Cultural Heritage Partners is the law firm representing the town of Nantucket with this agreement. And it sounds like their discussions are, or more than sounds like, they stated to me in our meeting that they were hoping this opens the door to add to the good neighbor agreement for more protections. And maybe the route we should be taking at this point is thinking about what we would like to see added in that agreement. Because the agreement could possibly go either direction. If the agreement is going to be kept, then it needs to be strengthened to protect what we're looking to protect. Thank you, Scott. Bob?
so I had a call as well. I was on a call with Amy DeCibero and Val Oliver and myself and Pete Kaiser and Brooke Moore and their lawyers. And they said the same thing to us that they said to you, that we're in ongoing negotiations. But the thing that stuck in my head was at the end of the meeting, the lawyer said to us, one of the things we need from you is we need to know what you guys need to be whole for when the next blade failure happens. Exact words. So they're already anticipating that another blade failure is going to happen. So when I left that meeting, I thought to myself, so we're gonna have to deal with fiberglass shrouds and microplastics on our beaches for how many years? And what is that worth to our tourism economy? And what is it worth to our shellfishing? Even if it doesn't touch any of the harbors, just the South Shore alone. If that, we have to close our beaches once a year because there's another blade that broke. This contract, as you just said, is terrible for us. It's great for Vineyard Wind. And this was negotiated by Cultural Heritage Partners, supposedly our lawyers. I don't trust these guys. I don't think these guys have Nantucket's best interests in mind. I never did. If you dig into where they're from and who they work for, there's a lot of questions here. And I told Brooke that I think that you've inherited a mess, that 3 of the members on the present Board of Selectmen didn't sign this agreement. Only 2 did. And our hands are tied as to whether we can sue Vineyard Wind and G of Vinova over these blade failures and this, because of this good neighbor agreement. And I believe the town should exit from the good neighbor agreement and either go back to the table and negotiate one that is good for the town, because I don't think this one is, or go to the courts and try to get whole for this, because what's to say we're not gonna have a blade failure every year? And We only have 60 something of them now. What happens when we have 250 of them? That's what, this agreement covers the first 4 phases. And I think total build out is somewhere between 250 and 300. That's a lot of turbines. If 1% fails every year, that's a lot.
Well, this agreement covers 5 phases. Vineyard Wind 1 is 62 turbines. Did you have a number for the
No,
all 5?
all I was gonna say, if you really do the study, it goes all the way down to South Carolina,
Yeah,
all the proposed
but this
stuff.
doesn't cover all that. This
No.
just covers the first, as you said, 5 phases. You know, and there's I don't know. I mean, I know we're an advisory board and they're hearing this from a lot of people now, and there's a lot of businesses that have signed on to Jesse Zandoli's group and the petition. And, you know, I don't fault the selectmen for any of this. It's not their fault. It's not the town's fault. I mean, nobody knew 4.5 years ago when they signed this, that this was gonna turn into this monstrosity of a project. We had no idea. They said, oh, we're gonna put some turbines. I mean, I was on the board when they first came to the town with this initial proposal, and they said, yeah, we're gonna put some turbines south of the island. You're not gonna be able to see them. It's gonna be good for the, you know, it's green energy. It's good for everyone. We went, okay, well, yeah, sounds good. We all thought that.
Mhm.
But now that we've got to see the first phase, and now that we've already had a blade failure, and now that they've had 2 blade failures in England, and they just sent some blades from New Bedford to England or to France, and they won't even give you a reason why. And when you ask these questions, I asked Brooke if she knew more, and she said, no, we've only been told the information that we've been given. There's a lot of vagueness here, and I'm just, as a personally, I'm not comfortable with it. I can't go to these lawyers and say, oh, we need $500,000 the next time a blade breaks. I don't think there's a monetary amount of money that makes it okay for a blade to break and wash up on our beaches. I just don't.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Franzuto,
Yeah, can I ask through you to Tara? Tara, how long is it gonna take to get the results of the testing of those microplastics?
Like I said, they took the first 2 weeks up there, so I'm hoping that at the most it takes 2 weeks, I would say. I don't know, it's, you know, they have to make reservations to use the machine. We have like the initial counts that we can compare, but again, they have to verify that what we're counting is a plastic, and there's a process.
Okay, well, so it's not a long time to wait. You know, I agree with Bob. I think that we need to not be trying to negotiate some kind of a settlement. I think along with what Scott Anderson said, we need to get away from this agreement as soon as possible and you know, renegotiate. Certainly, if it looks like these plastics are going to be found in the harbor and possibly affect the shellfish, then I think we as a board have a very strong leg to weigh in on. But I read the agreement, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, but I tell you what, it's the most convoluted thing I've ever read.
thank you, Dave. Scott,
I'm not gonna comment on the legal aspect of the contract, because I've done expert witness work on behalf of attorneys for stuff like this and states. But you gotta put in stuff with pollution. It has to cover pollution. You need surety bonding or escrow accounts to protect everybody. Because if you're dealing with a large multinational corporation, they're just gonna laugh at us and lawyer up. And this will go on, we'll all be dead. And my other concern is that the microplastics and what's happened here, even if it comes back with some of your testing, I think you have to look at the long-term effect of microplastics and discharge, because only a fraction of scallop or shellfish are gonna be impacted immediately. But if you get multiple failures over multiple years, now I think you have a bigger problem, because it'll start to be cumulative.
Well, if I could just say one more thing, you know, Scott brings up the idea of an escrow account, which plays into what Bob was saying as far as not being able to put a number on this. And when you can't put a number on it, then what you do is you have an escrow account, which accumulates over time. So when there is a problem, there is money to be tapped into. And they're far more learned people than me as far as contracts are concerned, but you gotta look at the long term here. We can't be just saying, "Oh yeah, give us $5 million and we'll call it even." No, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. This is a long term issue.
Mr. Chairman,
Peter,
you might start with a guy who is, I think he took over for Gary Toner, right? For Nantucket Surf School, and he was very vocal about how his business was. He shut down.
Gavin Norton.
Yeah, he shut down for a number of weeks because of that.
he's aside from Gary Conan. Gary still does it.
Okay, so, but
Gavin
you get
is-
numbers from him, that'd be a place to start, and of course, we extrapolate out from that, but, you know. And anyone else that was, that claimed, you know, financial hardship during that, I mean, that's a place to start.
Jim,
Someone asked a question, anyone knows the answer to this, but so there's no escrow account for pollution cleanup or plastic cleanup
It does-
or removal of the turbines at some point?
So they're bone, or bone, or whatever it's called, waived. Normally, when you do a project like this, like when they did the SBPF thing, they had to put escrow account to remove those things. Bone, is it bone? Bone, excuse me. Waived the escrow account to remove these turbines for 15 years. Ironically, the contract ends in 15 years. So I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not, you know, I'm not stupid either. I know what's gonna happen. In 15 years, this project's probably gonna be obsolete. Something else is gonna come down the pipe that's much better than wind. Vineyard Wind's gonna go like this, claim bankruptcy, walk away. There's no escrow money, there's no agreement to make them force it, and who's gonna be left with? We're gonna let these things just kind of fall into the water? The government's not gonna move them. Look at the size of the ships that are out there now to put them up. There's only like 10 ships on the whole East Coast that can do this work. The company that's out there right now lifting the blade off the bottom is
Joe Farrell's?
Joe Farrell's company. They had to bring that barge all the way up from like Florida. And there's 15 pieces of it that they've marked with sonar. So when they start bringing up those 15 pieces, the styrofoam and all that stuff's gonna start coming off it again. Allison Taylor has a house in Smith's Point. She came last week to go scalping like she does every year. And she walked down on the beach and in 15 minutes found 3 little pieces the size of a dime on the beach. The stuff's still there. Every time you get a storm, it's buried in the sand. You got fiberglass shrouds that are like needles. I mean, we're gonna be dealing with stuff for decades. And we're just supposed to throw a number on it and say, that's fine. You know, give us, yeah, $5 million. We'll turn we won't care. It's, you know, I just don't think I don't think there's a number you can put on it personally.
well, to add to that, when you really look at it, it seems like it's, for lack of a better way to say this, unmitigatable. If a blade falls and shatters when it hits the water, there's no automatic boom system that's gonna deploy on its own. I mean, other than having men 24/7 in the transfer station out there, which I imagine has sleeping quarters in it, and a boat ready to deploy, something like an old 44-foot lifeboat retired from the Coast Guard or something, that they could get out there and wrap around and get the boom around it. Other than that, I can't think of any magical system that's gonna keep this debris from spreading. And I don't think we should be reluctant to think that it's not entering both of our harbors. Mattocket Harbor is very easy for it to enter. It seems like it may be less easy to enter Nantucket Harbor, but we have 2 incoming tides per day. We have strong tides. And if this stuff is making its way all the way to the Cape and beyond, Rhode Island, Long Island, certainly a tide can bring it into our harbor as well. And that's, you know, where our biggest concern lies. But of course, everything attached to that concern leads out to the turbines themselves. Board members, Scott,
One of my bigger concerns is actually fish as compared to shellfish. I mean, you're out there all the time, they're going after shiny objects. That little bit of plastic that's not even microplastic, the fish will start going after that.
Mr. Chairman,
Peter,
Please.
so, the exchange between Tara and Mary, what's her last name, Tuck, is that right?
Mary Chalk,
Oh,
Okay, hard to tell.
that was at our last meeting.
Yeah, our last
That's
meeting.
Mary Chalky.
And Sarah, Tara was explaining to her that, she was certain that this. People aren't gonna be in danger because we're just eating the mussel. And that woman asked if testing could be done on other shellfish, and Tara said, no, the hatchery isn't set up for that. But that'd be a thing where we wanna know if the oysters are affected, if the oysters are taking it up, that's a place. Would think. People who are gonna be affected. No,
Yes.
I think it's also important to consider in this whole conversation that there already is a background of microplastics in our harbor and in our waters. And it is highest in Nantucket Harbor. It's higher than in Surfside. And that's in the surface water and that's also in the sand. So I had a follow-up discussion with Mary Chalk and explained my reasoning and why I thought scallops were safe. And I think that, you know, in the bigger picture of everything, aside from this wind turbine event, we also need to consider what we're doing to our own harbor and our own inputs that are causing plastics to get into the water. This is, you know, like you said, a cumulative effect, and it's not helping anything, but also this stuff is already here.
It's like nitrogen load. It's not, doesn't come from any one source, but everything that we can do to. Obviously, not having turbines break or blades break once a year or once every 2 years or whatever would definitely help to keep the plastics down. I mean, there are definitely plastics, other forced sources of plastics in the harbor, and I don't know if there's any way to ever decipher between a piece of styrofoam off of a turbine blade and just plastics in general that are in the harbor. But we sure know well enough that all this stuff floating around isn't good, and you know, like you said, Madigan Harbor is a lot easier for it to get in than town, but there is a littoral drift around the island that it'll eventually go past the jetties, and when the tide's coming in, it's gonna get sucked in. There's no way around it.
And Tara, that is often brought up. We already have this type of pollution here. And you know, we still have, I'm sure, parts of some boats that are breaking apart as we speak on the bottom of the harbor. This simply is adding to that. And it's something that needs to be discussed with future failures in mind, as far as microplastics in general before this incident occurred. We added this microplastics under health of the harbors on our agenda in hopes of researching and coming up with more solutions for what we currently have. So certainly more studying, more identification is what's needed, and figuring out education and outreach to try to limit the input into the harbors of this type of debris. Specifically on this topic, Vineyard Wind, any more discussion from the board? Mr. Bossi, anything?
Thanks, sorry, I had it on mute. Yeah, I'm trying to organize my thoughts on this. You know, I agree with everything that's been said. And this is, it's gonna be a long-term problem. What I really disagree with is looking at the good neighbor agreement, because we can't put anything in that agreement that could possibly protect this island. Really, I mean, and that agreement pertains to this island. Even if we got all the protections we wanted, what if we didn't have a west wind when the blade broke? Okay. Sorry, I
Dave,
have
we
to
lost you.
mute for a minute.
Okay, yell at the dog.
Oh,
No, he's right about that. I mean, it doesn't
No.
protect the venue, doesn't protect, Chatham, it doesn't protect, and the other option is if we write a good neighbor agreement that we think is good for Nantucket, Vinnie Wynn doesn't have to sign it. This was just basically, here's an agreement, we'll give you a bunch of money, you sign it, and it gags you to go against us publicly. That's all it is to me. I mean, I'm no lawyer, but that's
No.
what it seems like to me. Like, okay, we can't get on TV and say, this is bad for Nantucket. You never seen any politician or any town official say that because of this agreement. The public says it, but they don't say it.
wait a minute,
Right.
Dave.
If I could
Boston.
continue, I agree with that, right? That's probably the biggest problem with this agreement is that our board can't publicly go out and say how horrible this is. But to me, the problem, getting back to my point was, if we didn't have a west wind, what if there was a southeast wind, then Long Island would have been hit hard with all this foam and all the rest of the pieces of the blade. So this is a much bigger problem that needs to be addressed. I'm not sure that, which goes back to my saying about this board. It needs to be spoken about. It needs to be spoken about beyond our select board. We've got a governor who just approved the whole next phase. It's the greatest thing on earth, and it would seem to me that that's where the problem needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed by all of these people involved from here all the way around to New Jersey that are going to be looking at and dealing with this for the next 50 years. And I don't know how you do that. And that's why it's frustrating to me because I can't think of a way to deal with that. So that's my piece.
Well, Dave, I appreciate your rationale on that. I myself, and maybe I can speak for the rest of the board, kind of rely on your experience with law and Scott as well, Mr. Anderson. So, if the two of you, have a direction you want to suggest, please come out with it. Meantime, I'd like to know how the board feels. In lieu of knowing that there is discussion taking place right now with the select board and the other parties involved. Should we be keeping our thinking caps on for the next 2 weeks and coming back with some notes on of how we may form a letter of recommendation to the select board?
Mr. Chairman,
Peter Brace, please.
and I agree with Dave, but maybe partially. I mean, we're not gonna write the agreement, but we still have to call them out on it. And at the last meeting, we all agreed that we were gonna come here with points that we're gonna go into a letter as a recommendation or an advisory to the select board. So that calling them out on that would be one of those things that we would include in the letter. Doesn't mean that we're gonna rewrite it, but we can just point out we can point out all the holes in it and then add in whatever else we wanted to say. And so it sounds like what you're saying is we definitely need more time to think about what we feel. But
Well, that is my initial feeling after having met with the lawyers. I'd like to know how the rest of the board feels. Obviously, we're not sitting here chomping at the bit, ready to read our piece into the minutes for this meeting. But I believe it is our duty to have a recommendation in what's most important to us. And honestly, I think it should be viewed by the select board when we do create it and send it out, that it's in support of the select board, no matter which way they decide to go. It's in support of our island and our resources, so,
Can I just add one more thing?
yeah.
And I'll just reiterate what I said at the last meeting. It's where we stand. So we know that the select board can just bat that aside and say, we don't care, we're doing this. But if someone asks, not just the select board, but anyone who wants to know, this is where we stand. This is where we stand on this issue, and we need to say that. We need that. It can't be vague. It has to be, we talked about this, we spent several meetings on it, we feel this way, and we think the town and the select board should do this, so that we're not ambiguous on it.
Mr.
Mr.
DeCarlo.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Dave.
Mr. Frontier, go ahead.
Yeah, like I said at the last meeting, I think that the letter should be supportive of the selectmen. But I think that, I think we all feel pretty strongly, in our own beliefs on how and what we should say. But for me, I think that this microplastic thing needs to play out a little bit, just a little bit longer. I don't think that any letter that we write, in the next 2 weeks is gonna sway one way or the other. But I think we should have that information and obviously, so we can certainly include that in the letter. And I think Scott and Dave Bossy, get together and brainstorm a little bit. But like I said, we need to be supportive of them. But we also need to make our concerns for our harbors outlined in our letter.
Thanks, Dave. Bob.
Well, Dave Bossie is absolutely 100% correct. And this is the problem with this good neighbor agreement. Now, my take off the meeting I had with the lawyers is the lawyers are not ever going to advise the select board to get out of the good neighbor agreement. What they're trying to do is figure out how we can be made financially whole for the potential problems that this project causes. My personal opinion as a member of this board is to vehemently request the selectmen remove themselves from this good neighbor agreement and start to publicly advocate for this project to stop. And that means going to our state and local legislators and to the governor and getting on board with all the 80 businesses that have already signed on, and the Wampanoag tribe on the vineyard who's signed on. And I believe that I think the vineyard is getting to the same point that we're at right now, and that no one anticipated all the environmental impact that this was going to have on our island when they said, we're going to put up green windmills south of the island. The environmental impact that's going to potentially happen to this island way outweighs the good that these turbines are going to create. As a matter of fact, Baum said that this is not going to have any effect on global warming, this electricity. It's going to increase our bills as much as 75%, but that has nothing to do with what's going on here. The selectmen are going to try to take the path of least resistance. I get that. I was there. But I can tell you that when I was on the select board and I went to fisheries meetings as a representative of the town of Nantucket, acting as a member of the Board of Selectmen in their behalf, it had a lot of weight at these meetings instead of 100 people standing up and saying this is a bad thing. And until the select board have their hands untied and can publicly say, we don't want any more of these turbines south of the island, nothing's going to change, because they're not hearing this at the higher levels of government. What they're hearing is there's a handful of people in Nantucket are against wind energy and the turbines, and it's not the majority. The town's not against it, and that's unfortunate, because I think that the majority of the people in this town are against this project. Now they've seen what it's going down the road to be, and I know this is the Shellfish and Harbor Advisory Board, but I look at the South Shore and think that should still be somewhat under our purview. And if we're having a blade break every year or two and coming up on the beaches and dealing with pieces of fiberglass and plastic in the beach for years to come, I think it behooves us to say to the selectmen, we think you should get out of this agreement and we think you should start lobbying to slow this project down or, downsize it from 1,400 to maybe 300 or 200 or whatever we're gonna get stuck with, but and that's me. That's what I think. Now, I know that kind of goes against what Dave's saying to be supportive of the board, but I think that the more that the select board hear that people are against this, and these are the reasons why, the more it gives them a backbone to say, all right, we need to get out of this. Cape May, New Jersey, the county commissioners, the local government all said, no, we don't want this. And they threatened to take the developer to court, and the developer walked away because they didn't want to have the public backlash. Now,
Well, can I just say one thing to Bob? What I meant, Bob, and I'm not as articulate as I once was, but being supportive of the board, I totally agree with you as far as them withdrawing from the agreement. I'm just saying we should support that decision. I'm not
I agree
saying
with you there.
I'm not saying support them and we continue down this path, because this path isn't A, it's not going away, and B, it's not going to get any better. So no, my suggestion of supporting the board is to withdraw from the agreement and let's start formulating a letter. Some of the points that you just made need to be outlined in that letter. Some of the points that all of us have made need to be outlined in that letter, along with the science portion from Tara. So yeah, I think, sooner the better, but that's what I meant.
Thank you, Dave. Peter?
So I see it as us fighting this is like, so putting our support for the select board on layaway. It will not come out as support in the beginning, but eventually if we bring the select board around, then we'll be kind of ahead of the curve, and we're doing this because this is what we believe in, and we're showing the select board that they should believe in this as well, because we're all their constituents. And
That's right.
and then I wanted to say was that for Bobby and for Jim and for Dan Frank and the other guys that, met her, who are year-round fishermen for several different species, if you take away the part that they get, if you take away their ability to fish in the area where the wind turbines are, or the places where they're going to be affected by whatever damage we get from those things falling apart or whatever, then that's one part of their income that comes away, that then they have to rely on the stuff that the other species that they are going for. It all works, and I can say this with authority because now I've been a gig worker for like 10 years now, and I have 3 or 4 different jobs that all sort of I've made work together. If you take one away, then I'm not having a good winter. So, and this comment is, for our jurisdiction, only going out 3 miles, and that's true, but do you guys know what I'm saying, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
If I can make one last comment.
Please
real
do,
quick. I
Bob.
know this, we've been dragging this for a while, but we were elected to this board, not appointed by the board of selectmen. And we all ran for these offices for different reasons, but I think that the majority is we all have a passion about the water around the island, and we all have certain expertise that we bring to the board. And I know when I was on the select board, I was often looked to by the other board members as their authority as to what we should do when it comes to water. There are no fishermen on that board. There are no watermen on that board. So they may take our recommendation and just put it in the trash can, but I think that it will weigh with them if we spend some time in the next, this doesn't have to happen in the next week, but in the next couple meetings between now and maybe December, we start to work on a draft letter basically saying that we think the town should withdraw from the good neighbor agreement. And these are the reasons why, and that we think the town should, start to lobby at the higher levels of government to slow these projects down, and these are the reasons why. It gives them some background, and it gives them some support to maybe make that decision, because right now they're getting it from numerous different private organizations that really don't have, I don't wanna say the expertise, because they all have very, they're very knowledgeable on this, but this is what our job is, and if they take it, they can take it and they can do nothing with it, or they maybe do something with it, but at least for myself, I feel like, well, we did our part on this one thing, so that's where I'm at. I think we're all kind of on the same page here. I think, I'd be talking a little bit in circles, but it seems like we all wanna put a letter together and then start working on the points of the letter, and we can fine tune that over the next few meetings, but.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make one final point?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, looking at the enabling legislation for this board, it says, and I'll skip to the chase. Proper use and management of the water and shellfish of the town of Nantucket. The town of Nantucket's jurisdiction goes 3 miles out in all directions. So there's no discussion about whether it affects the harbor or not, whether it's in our jurisdiction or in this board's purview. It's the waters of the town of Nantucket, which by state law go out to 3 miles. So we're in the game, and I think we just need to make a strong point to get this done.
Thank you, Mr. Franzuto. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, I think it's important we go on record because I've met with a lot of legislators and senators over the years, and it's amazing. Most of those people say, I need to hear what you have to say because I don't know it myself. And to get somebody in Washington you only need like 5 people to write letters for them to start a committee to look into stuff. So I think we need to educate our own select board on things that they don't know, and that's kind of what we're here for.
Oh, and to that same kind of parallel. In meeting with the lawyers, at first I was wondering like, why me? Why are you calling me? And, have you called this person, this person, this person? And they did mention they called Bob. But what they said was, we want to know what we want to take the temperature of the public on this. And I felt like maybe they really wanted to know how I felt personally. And, how I feel personally, can very easily separate that from how I feel for what I've been elected to do here. And so, they did also mention, that in the beginning, they did inform the select board that, this project will not be stopped. And that is basically what influenced the select board to sign on to the good neighbor agreement. In looking at it like, whether you sign or not, this is gonna happen, so you might as well sign and take the money. And to me, that's, that didn't sit well with me. Because as Bob mentioned at the last meeting, if we ever get the whole amount of money, which to the town would be 12 million out of the 16, and that gets split with Preservation Trust and Mariah Mitchell, that doesn't add up to a whole lot. And honestly, I think our voice is worth more than that, and our voice is being stifled. So we've taken actually what is more valuable in being a voice, and given that up for $12 million. They also quoted, and I will quote this. I wasn't going to, but I'm going to, and that this came from Greg Werkheiser and Will Cook, that when President Biden took office, his number one priority was to fast track offshore wind. And nobody within his cabinet was willing to say no or anything negative about it to the president. And this also struck me in an odd way, because it's never been done before. So we're kind of a test site. We're kind of a guinea pig. And as Bob has said, if we could at least slow it down and lessen the amount, And let's give it time to prove itself. They've got 32 towers up, maybe more by now, because it is fast tracked. And that bothers me to just kind of roughshod fast track this for political reasons. And that is honestly what is happening, and that is what our lawyers said. So if our voice, getting our voice back, can tone this down a bit, and I would hate to see what's up there just, be left abandoned. I think everybody has the right to be able to find out now, is this worthwhile or viable? And let's keep what's there as an experiment, because that's honestly what it is. I'll end it with that. If there's nothing else from the board, out of respect from Vince being here, I'd give Vince the opportunity to speak, if you'd like, on this topic.
Oh, on Vineyard Wind or on,
On Vineyard Wind.
oh, no.
Thank you, Vince. Board members, anything else?
So where are we going from here? We're just waiting and seeing for a bit, and my next question was, what sort of timeline are we under? Because in less than a month, we could have a new president, we'll have a new president, and it may not be the one we all want, depending where you sit, and if it's the one that most of us don't want, I know he doesn't like wind. So it may not be on the fast track anymore, but that's maybe a discussion after the meeting, but I'm just wondering what we do. What are we doing between now and the next time we talk about this?
I don't think we take who's gonna be president.
No, I'm not, that was
into effect at all,
an aside, but, but it's the,
we're not prepared tonight to come up with anything, and like I said, after having this meeting, I felt as though it would be premature to have anything now. I think we've had some good input tonight. We get a good temperature of the board. So let's take these 2 weeks and come back. As far as timeline goes, I'd like to afford them the time to have all of their information in, but at the same time, I think we have enough information to realize that this project holds negative effects to our waters, and they're unmitigated at this point. And it's really hard to imagine how future failure can be mitigated. And as Bob said, you can't, or others have said, you can't just throw $5 million at this and say it's there, it's taken care of. We know that's not a reality. So my suggestion would be to come back next week more prepared in somehow putting together a letter of recommendation to the select board.
Mr. Chairman, I think maybe if we all just take the next 2 weeks and start a little,
It's actually 3 weeks to our next meeting.
okay, 3 weeks, I'll be more than happy for myself to just start making it like a point presentation, 5 or 6 things that I think needs to go into the letter, and then we can compare them all, and if we can find a consensus on the ones, we can start to draft the letter, Do we feel the town should withdraw from the good neighbor agreement? If we do, these are the reasons why, and, or if we don't, these are the reasons why we think we should stay in, and then we can compare them all and come up with a consensus from the board. If that works for everyone, I think
I'm
that's a
getting
good
some
place to
nods.
start.
Yeah. I'm
Sort of
getting
like
some
what we
nods.
did with the Wilkes Square, or Petrol Landing, excuse me, Petrol Landing.
Thanks, Bob.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bossy.
if it was my druthers, I'd have one thing in the letter. And that would ask that one of the members of our board who are an elected body and can be privy to private discussions at the select board level be invited into those meetings as a representative, as their nautical representative, because Bob said they don't have any fishermen, they don't have anybody on the board. We can provide that, and that would be the one thing that I would ask for immediately and say, we would like to offer the service of someone from this board. And if they turn that down, then I would follow it up with, well, okay, well, here's what we think you should do anyway. But if you get somebody inside those discussions, you get everything we've discussed on the inside presented to the select board. And again, we're elected officials, we're not appointed.
Dave,
it.
that's awesome. I was actually thinking of that on the way driving over here. If one of us could be involved in these discussions, it would be very helpful. Even if that person cannot come back to this board and reveal that information, it sounds like it's executive session information. I don't know if they would even accept one of our board members to that, but now that you bring that up, I'm wondering if we should, before we end this discussion, get that letter and that request out there now, while we're thinking about, over the next 3 weeks, what we want to suggest. But in the meantime, can we get one of us inserted into these meetings?
What I'd like to add to that would be, that person should sign a non-disclosure agreement. Let the town sit with that. I've had to sign non-disclosure agreements about having discussions that you can't come back here.
Well, anything in executive session couldn't leave the meeting, but I would, if Mr. Bossi's making that as a motion, I'd second it, because it's just a simple little request that due to along the lines of due to the fact that these negotiations have a lot to do with what happens on our waters around Nantucket, and we're elected by the voters of this town to represent their best interests in the water. We feel that someone needs to be included in these negotiations with Vineyard Wind.
Would you be willing to be that person?
Well, I don't think they'd want me, but they could pick who the person is.
Well,
You know,
wait a
but
minute,
We'd want you.
Yeah, I mean, I would be happy to do it, but I don't think that this present board would want me in there, because,
Let's get the letter out first and then, and see the
I mean, it
reaction.
might be you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm just, when you say waterman, I'm not a waterman. I've been on the
Could be
water
Jim then.
plenty, but I don't have
Well,
the knowledge that you or Jim have.
let's make the request and see if they respond to it, or if they
Okay.
just say no.
All right.
idea.
We can always educate you.
So I will make that motion. I will consider that I made that motion to drop that letter for our next meeting. And then we could just approve it then, or we could refine it then. Offering that services. I think hopefully Peter got that in the minutes because it's on the recording, because that was well said.
I just,
Oh.
I'll second that motion, but for discussion, I'm sorry, maybe I'm just stupid, but if we get this and somebody gets on there, great. You can't bring the information back to us to tell us what happened, so how does that help us?
Well, it helps us in the point that that anyone who gets on there from this board would tell them exactly what we just discussed for the last hour.
It's a one-way
That-
pipeline. Yes, right. Sorry,
Our
sorry.
information from this board can at least be transferred to the
Okay.
select board. We may not be able to get information back from executive session meetings, but at least the feelings and the temperature, what this board is talking about, can be revealed to the select board.
Good, I get it.
And I'm, wondering why we need to wait 3 weeks to create this letter, or why we can't vote to create that letter now, to simply, or to vote on this letter being created over the next week, to submit to the select board.
Has to be. it has
Mr.
to
Chairman,
be created.
we've done that. We have a history of that. We've actually, we've done email votes before. Just a final approval on wording on a letter. So if we could draw it up based on what Bobby said off the recording. I think that would short and sweet. We
I don't
understand
think
this.
we're outside of our agenda item.
No, I'm just saying that, this is an important letter. I mean, if you wanna do that by email, it's gotta be, I write the letter. And then I show it to you, and you tell me what you think, then I show it to you, as opposed to the group, then it's not an open meeting law violation, but.
Right, you can't send it to everyone at once, you have to send it to each person
And
individually.
then each person has to
Correct.
tell me you can. Then once they
Listen,
make all the changes, I have to do that all over again to make
wait,
sure
wait,
that.
wait, let's not overcomplicate this. We're simply asking for one of our board members to be included in their executive session meetings or any meeting
It has to
on
be,
Vineyard Wind.
right, it has to be properly written, Andy, and it
Yeah.
can't just be, hey, can we come to the meeting? It has to. I'm just saying, it has to, if it's coming from us, we're gonna sound professional doing it, and I'm not gonna send crap out, so.
I understand.
I'm gonna ask you guys what you
agree.
think, so.
Okay.
Do I do that? And do it that way, or do I do that and then we bring it back to the next meeting and you say it's great or whatever,
Okay,
so.
all right.
I'll do what you guys tell me to do.
Well, let's start I think,
We have the motion for it to be, Dave. I know you said to refer to the minutes for the wording, but, basically. Yes,
So-
Mr. Boston.
So yes, I'm sorry. So, right, a letter that would simply point out, and as I said, Bobby, it was eloquently put. So back on the recording is the statement basically that, understanding that the select board doesn't have any hands-on talent in the harbor and fishing industries, that, and this board does, and we are an elected body by the citizens of Nantucket, that we are offering as their advisors to provide a person subject to all executive session rules that will be able to offer them this consolidated board's opinion on various topics
Perfect.
to that effect. That's my motion.
And we'll call that motion already seconded by you, Mr. Brace.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Murphy.
Brief comment, if you're going to do this by email, I advise caution because you could run afoul of serial communication. So the safest thing to do will be to bring it back at the next meeting for full review of the committee. And then acceptance. I know it's 3 weeks, but you could have a larger impact by not running afoul of open meeting law.
And 3 weeks, and 3 weeks in the world of government is
Yeah.
3 years in the world of
I think
humans.
I think I'm fine with waiting, Peter, draw up the draft. You can send it out, we can all look at it, and then we can make changes and we can go over it as a group at the next meeting and approve it and then send it out. I think Vince is right, if this is, if this is something pretty important, and I don't want anyone to say that we didn't do it right, and if the selectmen reject it or take it, then I'll feel, either way, I'll feel like we did it the right way. And Dave's right. I mean, they're not gonna do a lot of negotiations in the next 3 weeks, so.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Franzerdo.
Yeah, just as in the body of the letter, I wouldn't want us to be limited to just executive sessions. I would want us to be included in all further discussions.
There is
Let them choose. And but we want to be involved in all further discussions, not just executive session stuff.
No,
there is a
and
precedence.
I don't mean to be I don't want to be limited by not being allowed to attend executive session. Their attorney will will advise them whether it's possible or not, because we are an elected board, not appointed. And that's a
Okay, then
huge
we
difference.
should say we want to be involved in all future discussions, including executive session.
Exactly, perfect. Yep.
There is a precedence here because when the board meets as the NRTA, they have a separate individual who is. I don't know if they're appointed or elected to that board, I can't remember, but. They actually sit in on all those meetings, so whether they're executive session or in public, so there's a precedence here to do this, so.
All right, and as far as whether they select. one of
Well,
our
let's see
board
if they
members
even,
or we
let's see if they
appoint
even
one
take
of-
the offer
Yeah.
first, I mean,
Yeah.
we
Okay.
can negotiate that with them. After the fact, I don't know what their thoughts gonna be on this, to be honest, so.
All right, I appreciate everybody's patience on the length of time on this, everybody in the room, thank you. Is there any more discussion? any more you need to know at the moment, Peter?
Nope.
I think you'll be able to go back over the minutes and handpick. So if there's nothing else to discuss. Mhm.
That's a little echo from.
If there's nothing else on Vineyard Wind.
You want to vote?
Oh,
Oh, yeah. we're
sorry.
gonna-
Thank you.
Because it was second.
Motion was made to basically send a letter or a request to the select board that one of our board members be included in all Vineyard Wind discussions. That was made by Mr. Bossy, that was seconded by Mr. Brace. Any more discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bossy,
Aye.
Mr. Brace,
All right,
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Sherlin.
Aye.
Mr. DeCosta.
Aye,
The chair votes aye as well.
you forgot Dave.
Mr. Franzuto.
Yeah, me
Sorry.
too.
Thanks. That's a unanimous decision. Sediment transport study and dredge plan continued discussion
Thanks. for
with our
making it.
sustainable coordinator. Vince Murphy.
I'm joining you at this end if
I'm
nobody.
sorry we cut that short on you last week.
Don't worry about it.
You know, some boards will go on for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. Just hasn't been our common practice.
No worries.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I was here 2 weeks ago. We discussed the sediment transport study and dredge plan that's in development. The big request from last week was, from 2 weeks ago, was to ask for locations that this board and members of the public think need dredging for what areas. And it's always, as I kept saying, dredging for navigation. I very much appreciated the conversation around dredging for water quality and dredging for habitat. And we're looking at ways of working that in. See how it works out. It is outside of scope, but I'm just trying to find a way to include it. So I did get some feedback during the meeting from committee members, not least from sorry, you're behind me on camera on the TV screen, Mr. Franzuto, but he gave some great ones about the area around Pocono Point and that area. After the meeting, from other people, I got some good suggestions from Mr. DeCosta and from Mr. Steve Lineback as well. So I've gotten some great feedback. It has been all taken in. I met last week and again this week to this morning with the project team. We discussed how it's all going to get incorporated, and it's all been taken in. So, you know, big call. Anywhere else that anyone else thinks needs dredging, and we've got all the key areas. Holocaust Harbour entrance, Hither Creek, Pocomo Points, Easy Street, Town Pier, investigate the corridor to the travel lift, Horseshed, Fourth Bend, Madaket Harbour Flats. I don't have a better name for it, but the sandbar that's in that area. Does anyone have a good name for that?
No, that's a good name.
Okay. And the area adjacent to Hulbert Avenue and jetties. That's what we've been hearing. That's what I've been getting. Anything else to add to that? Navigation being the primary.
Hey, Dave.
Sir.
Franzuto.
Sir,
The hump that we always get in the channel from the cut in the jetties, would that be part of this? Will we put that in there, or should that be for the Army Corps?
My apologies. I missed it. I do apologize. Investigate micro dredge for cut in jetties. It is on the list.
We get a sand hump in the channel there
right.
from, it's
Right.
not, it's
That-
deep
that-
enough now.
to answer your question, Bob, to be honest, I would, my first reaction is I dump it off on the Corps, but my second reaction is we need to investigate to see if that's something that we should probably take over or do instead of them. Because, you know, after the jetties project, they told me they're not going to be back for 30 years, but that's something that needs to be investigated, Mr. Murphy, that could that be a town initiative?
We've added it to the list to see if we can investigate it.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Just thinking about when we were looking at it, we were thinking to be in the kind of tens to small hundreds of yards, so relatively
Yeah.
small, relatively localized, very localized
Yeah.
and pretty
They
easy.
can pump it right on Grand Point or Jimmy's Beach, yeah.
But have to
Right.
say, when we were thinking this out, it would be an extra licensing step to do with the Army Corps, but it's not beyond the bounds of possibility.
No,
It's just,
but what
right now, it's
what
fine,
I'm
but that
saying-
does sound public.
What I'm saying is a call to the Corps to see if they think that it's in their purview. And if it's not, then we would take it on as an initiative. If it is in their purview, then we would take another tack. But, a call to the regulatory folks at the Corps saying, let me send you a chart. This is the area we're talking about. Is this in or out of your responsibility?
Thank you, Dave.
And then we would deal with it accordingly.
Jim,
Dave, maybe you can answer this question, but wouldn't that be the only channel for Nantucket that's like, quote, maintained at a certain depth? For dredging?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you
Wouldn't that be
said.
the only channel in Nantucket that's, quote, maintained for a certain depth for the ferries?
Yeah, it's maintained, right, it's maintained at 12 feet for the ferries. And you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. That works as a double-edged sword. It also keeps a lot of the big boats out of the channel and out of the harbor and makes them anchor in the federal anchorage, being held to 12 feet. So it's kind of a benefit and not, but yeah, that's
the drive.
But that's more under federal, isn't it, or state than
Federal.
town?
federal.
Okay.
Steamboats are
getting at.
drawing 9 to 10 feet. It seems like
A beast.
10-6. The Eagle is 10-6.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
Seems
real
like a
moon.
fine line,
On a real moon tide, it's.
yeah.
Vince, I thought of one other thing, but this is just to add to the list. This isn't a high priority, but it is it's a navigational thing. And it's the east end of the channel going into Mattocket. Since we buoy it.
East end of the channel by Jackson Point.
No, by Yule Point. So Sheila buoys the cut. So like myself and Jim, if we're going south of the island, we'll go through there. From Eel Point around through and then between Tuckernut and Smith's Point. And that end of that channel, it's a natural channel, but that end has shoaled up significantly to where Jimmy and I, who only draw 3.5 feet of water, we will hit bottom there. On a low tide on a moon.
Yeah.
So since it's buoyed, it's considered, I guess I would consider it a navigable channel, so that might be something that we would look at dredging.
Yeah. So that gets to a slightly different point, if you don't mind the open conversation. I've been chasing Sheila and she's promised me all of the buoyed lines, all of the buoyed navigation channels that she's done all the way back to 2018. She's trying to get it cleaned up in a format that she can send it to me, that I can then send it to the consultants. So we're looking at exactly that.
Yeah.
And the ones that we're also interested in is the ones that go up harbor to the head of the harbor as well.
Yeah.
Because she does that every year and she marks those, gets the GPS on every single buoy that goes down, or if it shifts through the year. And I'm trying to collect that data. I'm waiting on it. And as soon as I have it, that's going to be another key part.
Well, the Mattocket one's actually two channels, so there's a channel that comes from Eel Point, or from the outside of Eel Point. There used to be a buoy there, I can't remember the number, do you?
You mean the bell buoy itself?
Yeah, Eel Point, the Coast Guard took it away, but there was an Eel Point bell buoy there.
EP2. But Bobby, the reason that they took it away is for the exact reason that you're talking about. That shoal that is constantly moving, and they refuse to mark. They refuse to mark it if they can't mark good water. It was EP2, and that's why they took it out.
That channel comes from Eel Point to the tip, and then
Right.
it goes, there's another channel that goes from there to Tuckernut.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
The buoys change halfway through, so it's really two channels in one, even though. That's when people get into trouble there.
I'm sorry to say that once we get past that line that goes from Eel Point, the outside of Eel Point to Smith's Point, and I'm using Smith's Point as it was about 4 years ago, so it's a lot longer than it is today. That's the area that we're staying inside of. That's the bit of Mattocket.
Well, that Eel Point end is the shallowest end.
Yeah.
The other side, we have plenty of water.
Yeah,
So-
just the north end.
Just the north end of that channel.
Perfect.
And Vince, you said you were trying to work something with the Tuckernuck Landowners Association.
That's right. So I've been working with the Tucknock Land Trust. We're trying to work up ideas. So if we did manage to do, we've got to do some more, we have to do some more Bethnic surveys there. We have to find out how we're going to pay for that. I think there's some interest from their behalf of looking at that, because it's a small harbour that they have there. Then if they were to dredge it, where would that material go? And whale is one of the ideas, but would it go somewhere else or nourish their south shore? And then once you do put it back into the, on the beach and into the littoral system, how long before it comes back around that and bites you again? So then I would consider, just me thinking it out, and say, look, the whole of Tucknock is kind of shifting northbound anyway. We'll be better off on the north side somewhere, but then who are you benefiting? It gets into a tricky question because it's all private lots there. And it gets weird, but the only place that we could put it over there that's not a private lot is Whale, because that's not in any ownership.
Can I?
Now, on one of
One
the
thing-
sandbars, how to benefit the seals.
There's a cool sandbar forming just north of Tucknock. And that's a nice one. Yeah, the one thing I know that wouldn't go over well at all is if we suggested bringing Tucknock sand to Nantucket anywhere on this island. That would be a lead balloon.
Mr.
They
Chairman,
want it.
Mr. Franzuto?
yeah, just to remind you, Vince, that once that, for instance, that land that's south of that harbor, once that land accretes, it becomes Commonwealth property. So that has all accreted. That's all accreted sand. So that's a perfect disposal site for
Yeah.
for that sand, and it's adjacent to that harbor. So you wouldn't have to pump it very far.
Agreed. The risk
for
is
a-
that it
for a
could come back
benefit.
into. Yeah, the risk is that it would come back into the harbor is part one. And then second, yes, it is land of the Commonwealth. However, any neighboring landowner could go to land court and have it registered in their name.
Yeah.
So we could be benefiting somebody indirectly. Now, that's a big set of two ifs.
Okay, Vince, so you're doing your best to get in contact with Sheila.
Yes.
Sheila, as our current harbor master, I would imagine, we need to rely on her to communicate with you on this dredging program. So please continue to get what you can of information from her. Quickly, thank you for adding and keeping on your notes the portion about habitat, and maybe you can communicate with Tara, NRD, and also Nantucket Land and Water Council, where specifically to find a place that could be a test site for this, such as where they most recently attempted to transplant eelgrass, which we all want to see succeed. I believe personally, and I think it could scientifically be also proven that there's just so much granular sand in that area that it could not sustain the eelgrass. How about the land bank? I mean, one of our priorities in the past, and even long before I came around, Mr. Franzuto will vouch for this, that the town has always needed, or seems to need another boat launching ramp. Whether that boat launching ramp can handle, I mean, I'm even willing to accept, well, this is only suitable for launching skiffs, kayaks, nothing over, let's say, 18 feet. So the land bank has this property at the creeks, which is Otison property. They're currently taking over a portion of that property, which has a boat ramp at it. Otison's created their own boat ramp. It's a concrete boat ramp. There's actually a pier there. But how is the entrance into the creeks? They always seem to make it in and out, but they probably play the tide, the Otisons, with about an 18-foot scullable. And then Petro Landing, is a future project. My feelings are a boat ramp could work there. They'll probably never go for that, but will there be dredging necessary for what their plans currently are at Petro Landing? And so maybe some communication with the land bank, if you could suggest or mention, something about the creeks and it possibly becoming a public access for kayaks, canoes, small boats. What do they intend to do with that ramp? Would that be utilized or are they gonna eliminate it? But, you know, access to the waterfront, seems to, you know, the racks have been built at Pulpus Harbor, racks have been built in Shimo. And it seems to me, that we need more capacity for that and more areas to be able to spread out those activities. And they're actually the type of harbor activities that would be preferred, not being motorized crafts, more environmentally friendly. So why discourage people who want to enjoy the harbor by not having enough access when this access actually exists?
So there's a couple of different things I have for that. So the creeks here in Monomoy are interesting in their own right. Yes, the back end where the Olsons have their launch, that's there. But to get all the way in there, you have to pass all the land that's owned by the Conservation Foundation. And that's all wetlands. And you know, it's all good quality marsh habitat. And there's a principle in dredging that you have to be careful around wetlands. You know, those kind of wetlands that are very susceptible to any change. So the risk is if you were to say dredge in the open water through there, even if it was only a small amount, you create a further dip. All of the sand and stuff would slip into it over time. That would destabilize the edge of the marshland and the marsh would collapse in.
Yeah.
So you actually would do real damage to the marsh by dredging in through it. So that's something that I wouldn't like to entertain. Plus, I hate to use an Irish phrase, I would only imagine that NCF would have a conniption. They would lose their minds.
Okay.
And that is not a conversation I'd like to have with them. Then talking about Petro Landing with land bank in mind. Yes, that's a conversation that I could broach with the land bank, but I have a bigger conversation that, and I'm sorry, I missed it off my list. I read my list too quickly earlier. Town Pier is on this list. So the town pier and navigation to that is the primary concern. Then what you're getting to in a different way about access to the waterfront, that's a different question that's to do with environmental justice, another wonderful phrase that we're going to have to get used to because I'm working on another project related to that. So access to the waterfront is one of these things that's very important. It's one of these guaranteed rights under the Wetland Protection Act under Chapter 91. So that you must have. We know we have a lot of very small, kind of what I can only call unofficial boat launch points, just like down at the end of Washington Street Extension across from Sales House, where you can just launch kayaks there at the edge of the creeks, so to speak. But we need to improve our access to the waterfront. So I don't know how the dredge plan can do that, but a different plan that I'm looking at for environmental justice would look at that separately. So yes, I'm not forgetting about it.
Well, when you mentioned specifically Washington Street Extension, and I go down there quite often. And every time I read that sign that says "Do not block ramp," I kind of have to chuckle at myself at that sign because it's not a ramp at all. And if there could be some type of improvement there, not to put in a hard structure ramp, but certainly to take out, I mean, gosh, it's so shallow there for so far out. And, you know, there are some historic pictures from the 60s with a dredge right out in front of there, a very large dredge, dredging that area. I realize it'll most likely fill back in naturally, but to be able to establish, at least to back up the sign saying ramp, that there's a bit more deeper water there than there is now. I think once, if we were to start that and be able to get some deeper water there, then maybe we're able to maintain it in the future.
Yeah.
Just a thought. So,
I'm always amused by signs because nobody reads signs until they want to.
yeah,
So, yes, point taken about that. For boat access, yes, for the environmental justice thing that I was talking about, I'd like to talk about it from that point of view. From dredging, we've got to figure out the chapter 91 issue for Great Harbour Yacht Club first. And to see if it's worth having a channel that we could then have another little annex off of. So let me kick the tires on it.
thank you, Vince. Board members, any other suggestions of shallow areas, navigable issues to share with Vince?
I think he's got the list pretty well. covered.
Yeah, I'd like to say, for the entire board that we're proud to have you doing what you're doing. This has been a long time coming, and it seems as though you're being very diligent with it and covering all the bases you possibly can. We appreciate you coming in and asking us for suggestions and going around and getting information from whomever you can. Thank you, Vince.
Not a problem. Last point I have, tomorrow night, I'm taking this to select board. It's going to be a different type of presentation. They only want it as an update, but it gets in front of a different audience, then I'll get more feedback then again, and then I'll probably end up having to take all that feedback and then move forward. So that'll be the last of it tomorrow night at select board.
Thank you.
Are you specifically on the agenda?
Yes.
It's one of the first business items after all of the normal things for like contracts and accepting the agenda and public comment and such. It's the first main business item.
Thank you, Vince. Anything else from the board? I believe I'm correct, and November 5th is 3 weeks from today, not 2. So our next meeting's in 3 weeks. Anything anybody can think of they'd like to have on our next agenda? If you don't think of it now, Peter and I will be making that agenda most likely the Friday before the meeting.
Sure. It's not about that, but just other, did everybody get the email I sent about the proposal for the shellfish regulation? As far as the coupons and the,
I don't think I did.
I didn't get it.
No,
okay, I will resend that.
I didn't get it.
No.
I did, it went into my spam.
Alright.
But now
Sorry,
we're
you may
looking
have-
forward, now we're all looking forward to it, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, I will double check that.
And is that something, Tara, that we can fit in after the fact, possibly?
I think there's lots of things to fit in after
Okay.
the initial bushel.
All right, great. Anything else from the board? If not, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Anderson, I'll say seconded by Mr. DeCosta. Any discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor, Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Sherwin.
Aye.
Mr. DeCosta,
Aye.
Mr. Franzuto,
Aye.
Mr. Bossy,
All right.
Mr. Brace. Aye. Chair votes aye as well. Thank you, everyone. Good night. This meeting is adjourned.
You know what I found interesting? Was that? We took it that day.
You want these, Andy?
Hold on, you guys, I haven't hit.
Thanks, everyone.
Vince, thank you. Good night. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it
Kind of give you a spine tingling feeling, huh?
Yeah.
I agree.
Especially.
Kids.
Whether they have to write it on, they
You know.
have to write something, but you know.